Jordan, or I guess I should say J-Bar. Welcome to the podcast. Super excited to work with you, man. For people who aren't familiar with you and all the incredible stuff you're doing in the sports performance space, from softball to tennis and golf now, would you mind filling them in a little bit about who you are and all the amazing stuff you're doing?
I mean, I don't know if it's amazing stuff. I just think I'm a standard sports performance coach. But yeah, no, it's yeah, here, Jordan Barr, work at Duke University, assistant director of sports performance here. Work with men's golf, women's golf, men's and women's distance running and cross country and women's tennis here. Um, yeah, I've been doing this since 2015 when I first interned here at Duke. I got hired here on staff in 20, I want to say 2017 or 18. Um, Yeah, just like to say I did well enough as an intern for to wanna keep me around, and, just blessed enough to be in a situation where I could stick around and stay on with that, but, yeah, just coaching my athletes as best I can. I keep them healthy, keep them competitive, and that's what it's all about.
And we've heard from some of your former athletes on the podcast lately, and they all have absolutely incredible things to say about you and your work with them. I do got to ask, have they pushed you into a Pilates class yet, or
Not
still in the
not yet.
works?
Not yet. No, yeah, I listened to those. Yeah, not yet, thank goodness. I mean, again, everything has its place, everything's a toolbox, but yeah, Pilates isn't gonna really fit my schedule right
Bit
now.
of an acquired taste, right?
Yeah.
But hey, if somehow they do some research and it shows it takes a few strokes off your golf game, I'll have to be in there every day because I know I cannot keep pace with you on the green. That's
Yeah.
for sure, man. Have you always been a golfer and wanted to work in golf, or is this something that just kind of fell into place?
No, it's, I say growing up, I had, a soccer coach when I was younger. His name is Mark Taylor, and, his son played with me. I went to elementary school with him, and, he was always a big golfer, and he kinda got us, and he was somebody who really developed athletes from a young age, just like as a soccer player, as a soccer coach. So we were like his U9 coach, even younger than that. Then he would just being around him, take us to the driving range and things. And then I started to like to do it. And my parents got me lessons, etc. So didn't really play anything competitive. I did it for fun, probably when I was like 10 to 13, 14. Wanted to play in high school. I was better at soccer. So they're in the Northeast, golf and soccer the same season in high school. So I picked soccer, so I was better at it. Honestly, didn't play at all. Like maybe didn't even pick up a golf club until after I graduated college. So there was a 5, 6 year span at least where I didn't even touch a golf club. Then after I got married, my best friend Brandon, he played a lot. And so I just started picking up. We used to play a ton together. Then moving down to North Carolina, where it's essentially one of the homes of golf. I think there's more golf courses in North Carolina per capita than any other state. So, and then just being here at Duke University, having the privilege and of having a faculty membership here at our golf course, kind of set the tone for me being able to play. And yeah, I just kind of fell in love with it, actually playing, and um, went from like a recreational thing to now I try to actually practice and I compete in some amateur events and tournaments throughout the summertime when they can.
And it sounds like having that background in sports as an athlete yourself really helps set you up to succeed as a performance coach, as a strength coach, working with that athletes that way, because I'm sure they find you quite relatable being how you were kind of in their shoes not that long ago, right?
It's weird to think not that long ago, and I graduated college in 2012, so, it's flying by, but yeah, I think being an athlete is one of the largest things that helps you be empathetic towards the athletes you're working with. I think that's a huge advantage for me in the sports performance world. Anybody who's working in college athletics, if you've been a collegiate athlete especially, you understand what they're going through, and I think that's helped me just the relationship side and coaching side of knowing what they're feeling as they're going through stuff. Like I played soccer. I played 3 semesters at Fairfield University, Connecticut. Um, Probably touch on it later, but I left, had a little quick spell of attempting to play professional soccer, then came back, finished, got back into college and finished. Still played soccer in college after that as well. Um, and yeah, I was there when you had 6 a.m. workouts, had conditioning tests. I've done the studying on the buses, driving back from a 4-hour road trip and you didn't stay overnight, you have class at 8:30 the next morning, and working through soreness, being sick and trying to perform and exams and all these things. So I know exactly what those athletes were going through and what they felt like. Maybe not to the academic standard of Duke, but still you have to maintain GPA. You need to make sure you're doing well in school just to be able to perform on the field. So
Absolutely.
that's huge. That's huge in coaching.
As you outlined, the modern athlete and athletes in general are not just known for what they do in sport, but they're really known for being almost like a multi-hat jack of all trades, if you will. Because as you mentioned, you have to succeed academically, you have to succeed physically, but the travel demands and all of these other kind of stressors that we don't even think about enter the picture. And it's really a unique 4 years or 5 years now, I guess it is, that an athlete will experience that way, and it's really like nothing else. I think the relationship side of it is arguably the most important side of it. People talk all the time, and we're probably guilty of it on the podcast, talking about, this program versus that program. How do we periodize? How do we plan in season versus out of season, return to play? Like, the conversations are endless. And don't get me wrong, it's phenomenal. But at the end of the day, if you can't build a relationship with someone, if you don't have their trust, if you don't know how to communicate with them, and you don't have them leaving saying, I can't wait to work with them again. They really understand me. They get me. If something goes wrong, I know they're there for me and they're able to help me out. Like, if you don't have that, to me, that is literally the cornerstone of what we need in coaching, whether you're a strength coach, performance coach, a rehab provider, an ATC, whatever your title is. Like, I feel like it always comes back to, can you literally connect with the people that you're trying to work with? And it certainly seems like you've done a phenomenal job of that, not just in sports that you have personal experience in, like golf and soccer, but also with sports that, I'm assuming you've never played softball before. I'm assuming you're not a tennis guy, like, it's incredible to be able to connect with athletes where it's like, hey, I personally haven't been here, but I've been close enough where I can literally get their trust in a very short amount of time, and they can come to me with whatever they need whenever they need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And generally, it comes from a big part of the way I grew up. My back in the day, my dad's a pastor and caring about people, and I got to be around him as he's essentially putting people first, which is a big part of the way I grew up, and even still do so. Um, with when I first get athletes in here, especially new athletes, and when I start off the year, I like to kind of not set ground rules, but let them know like what my qualities or philosophy is, etc. I have these three, we call it core values, generally that I like to put emphasis on my athletes is integrity, effort, and respect. And kind of in that, boiling it down to at the end, I always let them know that I care about them more as a person. I know that they know that, so that when I give them something here in the weight room or doing conditioning, it's not just because, right? I'm not giving them something just because it's hard or just because I want them to do a certain movement that I like. It's always because I want them to succeed at their sport, and knowing, again, going back to my experience as an athlete, I know what it's like to want to win. I know what it's like to be competitive, want to succeed as an athlete. And I want that so bad for them that I want to put their actual well-being first, because yes, I want them to compete and succeed, but they're not going to perform at a high level if they don't have that, you know, internal feeling of like, okay, I trust him. He loves me as a person. Now I can go in there knowing that everything I do in here is to actually help me get better as an athlete, keep me healthy, and just help me overall. So
You outlined your core values there very eloquently, and you emphasized integrity and effort. And I can't help but think those have been things, as you mentioned, you've had for a long time. But there's got to be interns and other new strength coaches out there who they haven't really ironed out their core values yet, or they're trying to kind of figure out their coaching philosophy and how they put this person first or person centric kind of approach into their framework that way. How do you recommend, or how do you work with interns to help them go about deciding what they value and how they're going to portray that to the athletes that they work with?
yeah. I mean, I've had some good influences along the way too. My friends, other coaches around the country, et cetera, and people that I've grown up knowing in college and other coaches I've worked with or had mentors as, or even just really good friends. But um, even I tell the interns as well, you're a culmination of all of your life experiences right now. And, a core value isn't just some word you pick because you like it. Everything you've experienced as a person is leading up to how you are right now as a person and as a coach, and how you treat other people and how you've experienced it helps you with empathy and compassion. And those experiences that you had are things that you can look back on and say, I really value these I really value these values. I really value these characteristics, right? So um, things for me, integrity is just boiling it down to you live without gaps, right? You do what you do what you say when you do you're doing what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, etc. Um, effort. This is a big one I like to emphasize too, because effort just doesn't mean trying hard, right? This is a big part of not just going all out with all of your exertion and energy. Effort means an extreme attention to detail with what you're trying to do in the moment, right? That doesn't mean, it goes out to mobility. You can do mobility work with maximum effort, right? So it doesn't mean you have to go all out and exert as much energy as you can. It means how much detail can you pay attention to when you're doing something and do it how I'm asking you to do it. That's a big part of effort. And going down back to respect, we had a former, I call it late colleague, Greg Dale, who is a massive part in the psychological department here, the mental health and performance side of a lot of athletes I worked with. And sadly, he passed away a few years ago of cancer. But he had this big side, which has influenced me, of having dignity versus respect. Right. Dignity is something you have as a person. It never changes. You always have value as a person. And that happens no matter what, no matter how you treat me, how I treat you, you always have you have dignity. It's like you are a person. And, I love you for that. Respect is earned, right? Respect is continuously show up. You are do things the right way. So those first two lead into the respect part. If you have a high aspect of integrity, you continually put in effort, then you're going to earn my respect. But without even those two, going back to that dignity part, you always have dignity. I'll love you no matter what as a person. Doesn't mean I'm going to continue to respect what you do because you're not, if you don't pay attention and you're not respectful towards me, etc. Um, then that has to be earned, but kind of leading it back into those things. So I don't know if I answered that question well.
And those are the kinds of things that, as you mentioned, you expect them from the athletes, but they also get them from you. And integrity, the first part to your puzzle that way, that to me is the kind of thing that takes forever to earn, but seconds to destroy,
Yeah.
right? You don't just immediately meet someone and they have full integrity. It takes time, it takes repetition, and it takes doing things as you say you're going to do them over and over and over again. But you can lose that in
Yeah,
seconds.
sure. And I think a big part of that is going to be owning your mistakes, right? Because if you make a mistake and you try to cover it up like you thought, like it was I didn't like you try to change the narrative so that it looks like you didn't make a mistake or it was like your intention the whole time. It's like the more athletes are a lot smarter, more adaptable than you think. They pick up on things, right? So if I tried to cover up a mistake I made, they're going to sense that I covered up a mistake, right? So, um, going back to that's the fun part. Looking back at the other podcast, I think it was Peyton and Rain. Like there was a time where, long story short, we got new lines on our turf fields out here, and we've been doing the run test, their condition test with softball. And they got new turf fields. They changed it. So the lines were a little bit different. So we did the same conditioning test with the same lines that were on the field, but we were looking back on it. They were actually a little bit shorter than the lines that we had done previously. So measuring the lines out, they essentially did the conditioning test, but at a shorter distance without any modifications at the times that they need to do it in. So talking as a staff, we needed it just as, again, accountability and integrity. We needed them to run it again just to make sure that it's the same as years past to set a standard, right? And the hardest thing for me to do, because they were so excited that everybody passed the run test, right? That was a big part. Every year in the fall, they go pass their conditioning test and they have a good time, right? And then they celebrate about it and then like, yeah, we all passed. Um, coming in, that was a Friday. So think about it, for that Friday, they passed the run test, a weekend goes by, talk with the staff, we need to run it again. So after lift, I see them on Monday morning. I'm like, after lift, I'm like, oh my goodness, how am I gonna tell these kids that we have to run it again on Friday? So I owned it. So that's why going back, Peyton, I think Peyton said that I ran the run test. Thinking back on the story, I told him, I was like, we need to, I measured it. It was measured incorrectly. I'm taking it for me. I'm taking this one on the chest. I will run the run test because I'm making you run it again. So I will run the run test for you. I don't know when I'm going to do it, but before this year's out, I will run it. We had an intern, Jake Ayers, who actually ran it with me. So following in the springtime, that was in the fall. In the springtime, the week, I think it's before ACC's here, Jake and I went out and we ran the full run test, just because I said I would. But I mean, that was one of the hardest things I've had to do. And seeing they were so excited and they passed it and they went out to celebrate as a team and they come back and have to learn that, oh my goodness, because they dread it. It's a psychological thing too of having to pass it, the stress that they go through, and they all passed it the next time too anyway, so it wasn't like a drastic thing. We just need to make sure they still had that standard of the correct time and the correct distance, etc. But
Yeah.
that was
And
that was the reason why I ran it again. But I was like, man, I'm gonna do this for you. I'm taking this. Essentially, it's my fault. I should have checked the lines. It's my bad, guys.
there's a
Um,
few incredible things about that story. And first off, just going back to your comments about effort and attention to detail, right? You recognized that, hey, this was not where it's been in the past, but we are not willing to compromise. Like, we still have to do the work, even if it means repeating the test, even if it is a little bit of a buzzkill. Like, we are not willing to compromise on our standard, even though we made a mistake. But because there was a mistake made, extreme ownership was taken. And I think that is something that is becoming absolutely essential in whatever
yeah,
space you're in. I don't care what your title is. I don't care what your job is, whatever it is. Like, you have to be able to own things. You have to own the goods, the bads, the uglies, the highs, lows, everything in between that way. And I think a lot of times when things don't go as planned, people always look for the excuses. They look for something to blame. They try and deflect. And it's so easy to do that. But as you mentioned, kids are getting smarter and smarter and smarter, and they see through that at rates that, maybe they didn't in the past. And as a result, you have to own everything. One, not just because they see through it, but two, it's the right thing to do, right? I
yeah,
think character and being that kind of person that others think you are, right? Like, I know it's cliche, but everyone's like, oh, be the kind of person your dog thinks you are. It's like, it sounds stupid, but then you start and think about it, and it's like, well, to your dog, you're the whole world. So if that's who you are to your dog, then you need to go out and deliver that level of personal character with every interaction that you get. And then the last thing, you jumped in the trenches yourself and did the test. And Nick Sodato and I refer to this as the dirty work, right? It's like you're literally going to jump in the trenches and do the work that no one wants to do, right? You're going to get in there, you're going to sweat, and you're going to do what everyone else is doing. And that stuff is some of the most valuable. And I don't care if we're talking about relationship building or character building, but your ability to literally jump in and do the things that other people don't want to do because it's the right thing to do is a factor that I feel like we can't measure it, but if we could, it would likely be probably one of the biggest things that predicts someone's future success. I feel is how willing are you to literally jump into a less than optimal situation and just grin and bear it the whole time.
and I think there's touched on 2 points of that, jumping in and addressing the issue and then going and doing. I think looking at the opportunity, because I hadn't run the run test before, right? So that was an opportunity going back for me to experience what they're experiencing. Even I mean, for me, the day before I was going to do it, I was stressing out. I was like, man, I have to run this 20 reps and whatever full sprints down and back 20 times. It's going to take 30 minutes. Like, you get stressed out about it. For me, I didn't, you know, have a consequence of it. But for me, it was more the perception of the athlete saying, "Oh, well, he's going to fail, whatever." I didn't fail. I did practice a little bit. I had to different constraints there, but I trained for it a little bit just because I knew I had to. So it's an opportunity to see exactly what they were going through and making sure that, if someone in the future goes like, yeah, well, something that you didn't do. No, I actually have. I ran the run test. I know what it feels like. So I get it. And the other side of it, I think that going back to the life experiences, like being the athlete, I'm someone who I don't really like to avoid confrontation. I like immediate feedback, and I hate when things go unresolved for a long time. So kind of in that point of being a former athlete and like wanting to be coached, like I wanted to get there and address it as soon as possible so I could fix it. And, I wasn't going to go to the coaches and go to the athletes and say, all right, kind of play with it a little bit, whatever. Like I wanted to address it head on and get there quick so that they know, what's happening, because the longer things go unaddressed, then it just kind of makes things worse. Might be a different topic, but
You bring up an interesting point with that, though, is a lot of athletes have certain preferences that they like, and some like immediate feedback. And some, they want to be able to get feedback, but not right away. They want to kind of sit and ponder on it themselves for a little bit and think about, hey, what could I have done different? What should I have done better? And then kind of talk with you about it. And there's so many different learning styles and unique athlete kind of personalities out there that exist today. How are you able to, in a team setting where you've got, 10, 15, 20, sometimes even more of them at the same time, how are you able to deliver to a whole while also paying respect to the individual unique parts that make up that whole team?
I think the communication part of coaching is massive, right? So, again, going back again to life experiences, my first job out of college, in 2012 was, my wife and I, we got married at a very young age. I was 20, say 21? No, I was 23. She was 21, back in 2012. And I just knew I needed to start working right away. So first, I just took the first job that I was offered or got, which is a personal trainer at a corporate gym up in Chelmsford, Massachusetts called Best Fitness. And, as a personal trainer, you kind of have the grindy hours if you need to build a massive client list before you can cut it down. And in that massive client list, you have everybody from a 10-year-old whose parents want to get them in there just to kind of get them in shape and get them, whatever summertime workout for an hour, to an 80-year-old woman who had double hip replacements and she's technically done with her PT and now they don't know where to go because PT's like, well, you cleared with us, so go do something else. Maybe check out personal training. So, and everybody in between, to a 50-year-old dad getting ready for their daughter's graduation and wants to look good because they're going on a trip. So you have everywhere in between. Learning how to communicate to all of those different types of personalities and different demographics and psychographics, um, learning how to communicate the same types of information to all those different types of people and recognizing how they communicate, and, again, communicate with the 80-year-old woman to a 10-year-old boy, knowing how to, especially one-on-one, which I'm sure you're aware of in the PT study, you need to keep conversation going for an hour one-on-one. Like you learn how to talk to people real quick, how to ask questions. Um, so knowing how to communicate those and recognizing verbal and nonverbal cues of when somebody wants or doesn't want feedback is something that you can kind of pick up on as a coach, as a personal trainer. Like you in the PT setting, if someone doesn't want to be talked to, you can see it on their face, you can see in their language and their posture that like, hey, I need you to do this. And they kind of give you like this little, you can tell like you just kind of be quiet for a second, let them do their thing, and then you ask a question afterwards, and then so it's an art form, right? You just learn how to recognize how people are perceive how people are feeling in the moment without even needing verbal feedback. I was going off something else too. So yeah, learning how to communicate with different types of personalities, you know, and knowing how to keep that conversation going. This is my point. A big
Absolutely.
part of a big part of the communication aspect with athletes. I love one-on-one time because probably going back to the personal training, but also gives me the ability to learn about that athlete, right? So um, one of the biggest things I learned from my dad actually is when you ask questions, you have to care about the answer, right? You can't just ask questions and then be like, oh, okay, great. And then it was like, you have to care about the answer. And then you ask a question about their answer. It's you actually, that shows that you actually care about the person that's there, right? If you just ask random questions and you kind of like let them go and they ask about something else and they're like, oh, well, but like, if you actually care about that person, you're asking multiple questions just to learn about them. You want to know, do they about their families, about their preferences, about sports, like what, like you learn about them. And that way the conversations start to come easier because you can ask questions about the questions that you already know the answers to. You can start asking about their family, like, "Oh, how's your brother, doing in school?" Like whatever. Like, "Oh, I heard your brother's a football player at Wake. I saw they lost this weekend. They're like, how's he doing?" Whatever, So those types of conversations are huge. Just learning and getting to know people is a massive part of how to communicate with them in those larger settings, right? So that way, I know who I can shout across the room to, saying, "Hey, get lower. You're not doing that well enough," versus somebody who I know needs a quiet whisper in the ear, be like, "Hey, I know you could do this a little bit better. Just make sure next time you adjust your feet this way." Okay. They're like, you kind of leave and let them do their thing. So you just know how to start to communicate to different athletes with different learning styles.
I think that's absolutely spot on, and it's one of those things I think of things as like continuums and progressions and that sort of thing. And when it comes to communication, I call it shotgun to sniper. You start very broad and you cover a little bit of everything, right? You hit all the points, whether it's family or what they like to do or what they watch on TV or whatever it is. You just hit a little bit of everything. And then from there, you kind of focus in on the ones that you notice really seem to carry a lot of value and impact with them as a person that way. And I think, as you mentioned, studying and understanding communication is probably one of the most essential skills to any profession. Again, S&C, PT, whatever. If you understand how to talk with people and how to interact with people in the day to day, life becomes significantly easier. And it's an ever evolving process, but I've certainly picked up on a few things from different books I've read and stuff, but ultimately, I think getting out there and doing it, going in the trenches, doing the work, talking with people regularly, regardless of their age or whatever their athletic background is, literally just have the conversations and you get better at it. And to that point as well, I'm sure someone listening to this is going to say, well, I want to be a strength coach with college athletes. So therefore, I want to only work with college athletes, right? Like I've been there myself, right? You get a job out of PT school and you think, oh, I'm going to work with athletes. And then you start working with people that do not look very athletic and haven't sprinted in longer than you've been alive. And it's like, well, how can I still provide value in this situation, even though it's not what I wanted, but also obtain value? So when I do land that dream job or find myself in that situation that I've been working and working and working to get to, I'm ready and more prepared. And I took things from places that no one else even went because that's just where I ended up. I feel like that's kind of what you did going back to your personal training story. It's like, a lot of college strength coaches might not have experience working with someone in their 80s. They might not have experience working with someone, literally almost a decade before they walk into a college weight room for the first time. But being how you're able to kind of see the full spectrum, it allows you to provide a unique conversation element, but also provide for the athlete for life because you've seen where they were 5 to 10 years before they walked in your weight room, but you also see where they're going to end up 20 years, 30 years, 40 years afterwards. I think having that kind of more broad perspective allows you to not just connect with the athlete deeper, but also to your point before about the human element of all of this, literally always keeping the bigger picture in mind of like, hey, eventually they're not going to be, a college athlete anymore. Eventually, sport is going to end for them. But in your case, you've done a phenomenal job of making sure those athletes have a very positive relationship with exercise, with fitness, with performance to the point where they're still running, competing, doing athletic things, several years afterwards. I think to have that kind of impact on someone is really valuable. And just the words are not coming to me right now that really can captivate how essential that is to be able to have that kind of impact on someone at such a young age.
And I think, a big part of that of it's just again giving them the right feedback and letting them know, like, and just having the buy-in. And that the buy-in part to the training is a huge part of it. And going back to the answers and questions and asking athletes and getting that one-on-one time. Like when you start going back to the relationship side and you start asking questions and paying attention to the answers, and then so much as Again, I've had several athletes this way. Like you give athlete a fist bump or high five, just in general. There are some who don't like that. There are some who like don't like that physical, like too much physical contact, right? So remembering who those people are and like that, just remembering those different types of athletes, even the ones that do like bigger things. Like I've had athletes that have had signature high fives or signature handshakes with for 6 years now at this point. But just like remembering those little things help athletes know that I care about them. And then that helps with the buy in the weight room of, okay, he's giving me things that knows I'm going to get better with. Then they pay attention because they understand that the cues I'm giving them actually work. And that's part two. I'll kind of touch on this a little bit, but the cues I give them work. And then I think one of the biggest compliments for me for an athlete not too long ago was, you know, I can get any program I need to from anywhere, and I know how to do a squat really well. I know how to do an RDL and bench rest properly and do good push-ups and chin-ups. I know how to do rotational things and core work, and I don't need feedback from any given to me so much that I know I'm doing it well. And I was like, that's really good feedback. I appreciate that. So if they go to a gym, I know any athlete I work with, if they go to a commercial gym or a private gym, whatever, that they're going to be good. They have a really good foundation for training and they can continue to do things really well. And kind of going back, retracing those steps a little bit, what about the feedback I'm giving the athletes? One of the things I tell the interns that helps with buy-in for athletes, I tell the interns is have a very, very good knowledge and foundation of functional anatomy and physiology. So knowing how things move, why they move, understanding what makes things move, what different weight distribution do when they're, so again, that's coaching, I say coaching 101, but having a really good understanding of how things move, why the body moves the way it does, what muscles are moving and turning on and stabilized and activating on top of um, the part that I worked on that helped really well with me personal training and learning those was all of the regressions and progressions of a movement. Combining the functional anatomy with the regressions and progressions of any movement help you with analyzing an athlete's movement and giving them the proper cues to move really well in safe patterns, right? To help them grow the most and feel it in the right places and succeed in those movements to get stronger. So when you have the athlete buy-in of knowing that you care, and then you give them feedback and they can feel the change immediately because you gave them something good, some good verbal cues or physical cues, whatever, tactile cues or whatever it is. And then it's had an immediate impact on the way they've lifted. And then they can feel it impacting them on the field is like, that's an amazing circle to have with your athletes of good training, good feedback. He cares about me. I'm getting better at my sport. I want to train. Let's get in the weight room. And it's just that circle of continuously training, doing well, feedback, good feedback, performing, weight room, feedback. So it's that whole, they all have to do with each other. Again, those are my life experiences. And I think a lot of experiences I've had in my life also go to that non-coaching side too, if we ever get into the more relationship side stuff.
I think that's huge as well, like the progressions and regressions. That's something I've challenged a lot of past students with, right? Where's level 1? Where's level 100 for this exercise? Walk me through the continuum, right? And that can be super, super valuable. I also really like to pick a piece of equipment and say, hey, look, what can we do with this? Program a whole session around this one thing, because unfortunately, on the softer skills of coaching, if you will, sometimes things don't go as planned and the power's out, or stuff's broken, or they're renovating the weight room, or people are traveling, and it's like you got to make it work with what you've got. And if you can deliver that at a high level over and over and over again, I think that really goes a long way. And on top of that as well, sometimes you travel with the team. A lot of strength coaches are doing that now, and they're making it work in suboptimal conditions, hotel gyms, whatever that way. But I think that travel component provides a very unique opportunity to further connect with the athletes that way, especially if you're on long bus ride or flight or something like that. Has that been anything that you've been able to kind of leverage yourself to connect with the athletes? And if so, what kind of strategies have worked well to literally grow closer to athletes when it's like, hey, I'm here, but like we're not just in the weight room now. We're kind of on more of a different turf, if you will.
Yeah, sure. I think again, go back to personal training again. Same thing in a big corporate gym. Sometimes everything's taken, so you have to get creative with how you design workouts. And yeah, I mean, I've had given that clients and athletes, if I have literally two kettlebells to work with, we'll make it work. We'll do something. You can always you jump stuff, heavy, whatever. You can find a way to train with something, even if it's just body weight. You learn how to do body weight circuits really well when you're doing boot camps and group fitness, personal training. And then you get in here, like at Duke, we have everything we could ever need. It's like, it's almost overwhelming. You almost have too much stuff, um, which is absolute blessing. But it's, yeah, on the road. And, again, it just goes back to that idea of when you're with somebody, you're paying attention to them. And you ask, when you're asking questions, you do, again, going back to caring about the answers. And, um, and I think a big part of trust with you and the athlete is opening up yourself and becoming a little bit vulnerable. So having discussions just about how I can relate to them with things that I've experienced through my life. And I think fortunately and unfortunately, like in a way, we all have our backgrounds. We all have had lots of different experiences. I think in my life, I've had so many different experiences. Like there aren't many things an athlete or a person has gone through that I haven't experienced, like in a weird way. Just the way I grew up when, didn't have a ton of money growing up. Like, this is a weird, not trying to think about this, but like learning when I was, you know, older that we could only buy certain foods in the grocery store because we had coupons for those types of foods, right? So if growing up learning later is like, oh, we actually lived on food stamps for a little bit, or like going back to a point where, I've had, unfortunately, like I've had young friends pass away. I've had um, issues with, personally and through my family with eating disorders. Like I've gone through lots of things and people with, different experiences through that. So lots of these different life experiences, I think, I forget who calls it the plausibility structure. Again, just going back to the sum of your life experiences have created the person that you are now and how you dictate things and how you deal with things. My unique experiences have just led me to have the relationships and communication that I've had with the athletes under my care. And it's given me the ability to have these, I don't get too personal in these conversations because again, they're athletes, you're a coach, and you have to make sure it's good. But understanding, opening up about little things here and there, and helps you see things and interpret things, and develop good respectful friendships. And some that have obviously continued past now, where they're coming 25, 26 upwards now. Um, all those experiences that have led me be able to get in there, and that's including those road trips where you're sitting next to them on a plane, and or working out in a hotel gym, the small group of athletes, maybe they're the ones that don't play a ton. So you're the one that they're training consistently a lot more with you because they need to get the conditioning, they need to get the strength work and speed work, or they're rehabbing off an injury and they've had knee surgery and they can't play and they can't practice. So when they're training or practicing, they're with you in the weight room, or they're, while the team's out at, practice, you're doing all the rehab stuff with the AT on the sideline, or, um, you know, they want to train a little bit more, even just regular athletes, the healthy athletes want to train a little bit more in the hotel with you. Like, so you do 30-minute sessions in the hotel weight room. And it's just when you get to develop those one-on-one time or small group times, and you get to ask those questions and possibly open up about your experiences that help them buy in even more.
I think your point about being authentic and vulnerable and open with your athletes is huge. And there's so many different ways you can do that. And as you mentioned, there's a lot of unique life experiences that you might have had that allow you to relate to someone else. And, maybe you're someone who is fortunate enough to not have those things. That's okay too. Everyone's got embarrassing moments and stories. And I know one of the ones I go back to all the time with the guys that I work with now is, I was sitting on a plane one time and I looked at the girl next to me because of course she's kind of cute. And I'm like, so where are you going? Not knowing that we're on the
In the
same
same place.
plane going the same, Yeah, absolute dumb move, but, like, everyone has little
Yeah.
stories like that that you can share that sometimes lighten the mood, and I think there's, like we mentioned before about the art to some of these things, sometimes there's an art of lightening the mood amongst things, and sometimes there's an art of literally just getting a little bit deeper about things and knowing when to go which direction, I think is huge, and having that personal experience to relate to someone wherever they are, and if you can't relate to them, be authentically supportive and understanding of their situation. It's like sometimes people tell me stuff and I'm like, I literally cannot imagine what you're going through
Yeah.
right now. I can still be supportive even though I've not been in that situation myself. And I would imagine, you mentioned a lot of personal experiences there, but I'd imagine going back to what you said earlier too, there might have been a bit of a identity crisis kind of situation as well, where you said you played at Fairfield for a while and then we tried to go pro for soccer. And next thing you know, in a few years later, we're working as a personal trainer that way. Like, sometimes you have this plan for life and it doesn't necessarily go as you think it will. I think everyone, at some point or another says, I'm going to be the pro athlete and I'm going to make it. But it's like, just because you don't make it doesn't mean it wasn't successful. You pick up and learn so many different things along the way that you can then turn and go on and impact others with because you attempted. It's that
Yeah.
that being in the arena philosophy, I guess.
And I think that's a huge part of, like I said, the experience of knowing a lot of, like you said, a lot of these athletes want to go play pro, back there's some sports where athletes won't go play pro. They have no plans to, you know. But I was somebody have that has that experience, which a lot are going to have. Of I have tried to play professional sport and I failed. I don't have one of the cool success stories of like going and yeah, I made it and I played on this team for a few years. And I was like, no, I tried really hard for a while and got to essentially almost the highest level you can get to playing professional soccer. And I got injured. And then next thing you know, it's like nobody wants to sign or have an injured player on a trial. So it's like no one's gonna, your agent has a hard time saying things up. So you can't go train with somebody because you tore your groin. Like it's happened to me. So like you just kind of fall back into society and you're like, okay, well, I guess what's next? Go back home and rehab. Well, I guess I can't play pro soccer. I played college soccer. What if I can go back doing that? So I was like reaching out to a college coach and like, hey, would you mind? Well, I could, all the whatever. Would you have a spot if I was healthy? He's like, oh yeah, definitely, absolutely. So he works these out, you go back to college. So it's like, you know, you reach, that unique experience of me of literally hitting the pinnacle of the highest point of almost like so close to getting there. And then the disappointment and then acceptance of not being able to make it. And then just kind of reinserting yourself back into the normal world. And then going back into training. So obviously there's always that bit of disappointment that I have. Just always that I was like, man, I wish I could have, like what if? There's always a what if. But yeah, those it's helped me with the experience of like if an athlete wants to travel or has the potential to play a professional sport, I was like, just try, right? Just it doesn't mean because I want them to succeed, but the places that traveling will take you to, the experiences it gives you, or trying to play a professional sport, maybe you succeed. Like I hope you do. Absolutely, I'm here if you need me. But it helps you travel and you get to go see the world and recognizing how many experiences. Like I would trade those, even though I failed, I would trade those experiences for anything. Um, really hard, tough decisions I had to make. Cost me a lot of money too, but uh, it's just again, it all adds up to developing who you are later in life, and it gives you the opportunities to share these experiences with your athletes.
And they are once in a lifetime opportunities, right? Like,
Yeah,
if you want to go and make it in pro sport, if you get that call, especially right around the time you're playing D1 sport or collegiate sport that way, it's like send it. Find a way to go all in because,
yeah,
unfortunately, 15 years later, you don't get another shot. They don't
yeah,
call you up and say, "Hey, back in the day, 15 years ago or whatever, we knew you, came about and that sort of thing. Can you come back?" That just doesn't
yeah,
happen, unfortunately. So it's like you literally might only get one opportunity to go through that door. And I think and this is my personal opinion, emphasis on that. I think if you get the opportunity, you have to go all in, as opposed to a life where you wonder what would have happened if you did it. To me, the one who tried and failed is significantly better off long term than someone who never stepped foot in there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the way you get there too, the way I did is like you have to be bold, right? In your pursuit of that greatness of playing either whatever it is, could be a business, could be a position you're trying to get into a company or a position you try and get to in sport, whatever. You have to be bold. And I think there's so many things, different topic, honestly. It's like there are so many things back. They're trying to hold you back. If you talk, be like, I don't know, you probably shouldn't do that. But you gotta be respectful of them. It's like, yeah, you have to be respectful. But I feel like most of the people that I know that are in those higher positions have been bold in asking questions, just going straight to people like, hey, how can we make this work? Like how I got to the trials I were over in Europe was like, you didn't just, wait for people to contact you and you didn't ask somebody else to make a connection for us. You went and made connections and you were bold and saying, when can we do this? When can I sort this out? Like you have to go do it. Right. It's not a sit here and kind of wait and let other people like, yeah, I don't know if it's good. It's like, just go, like, just make those connections. Then you build confidence off those when you get, when you make a connection to that person in that higher position, you make a connection at the club that you're trying to get to, or they actually say, yeah, like, oh, we have a spot. Let's set you up with this. We have a good recommend. So I think that's a huge part of it is being bold in the pursuit of that greatness you're trying to get to.
You definitely have to be bold and you have to find ways to shoot your shot. And I think one of the places I've seen people get maybe off course with this is they will literally go out there and try to make connections with the sole purpose of how can this person provide value to me? And I think if that's the way you're going about life, then you're doing it wrong. I think it needs to be flip the script. How can I provide value to this person, this team, this organization, right?
Yeah.
This is the connection that might need to happen in order to do that. But ultimately, it's going back to that famous JFK line from years ago, right? It's not what your country can do for you, but what
Yeah.
can you do for your country at
Yeah.
the end of the day. And I think if you have that line of thinking in any opportunity as an athlete or someone who works with athletes in any capacity, what can I do that provides value to the person in front of me, the team in front of me, the organization that I'm a part of that way? As long as you have that line of thinking, you're going to end up where you need to be.
And I think a big part of that too, and I know a lot of coaches that I know personally in my network and other coaches who are probably new and up and coming. And I'm sure the graph, right? So the come out of college, you get your certification, you know everything, right? Then you realize you get into the space, you're like, I don't really know anything. Then you go back up and gradually learn more and more and more, and you can realize that you never stop learning, right? There's that huge drop off when you first start working of like, wow, I have no idea what I'm doing. I feel like I have imposter syndrome that don't know how to manage that. Like there's gonna be a drop off in that space when you think you know everything and then you don't. And you get humbled real quick and then you just start to realize you learn and learn and learn continuously. But one of the things I think it was an Eric Cressy and Brett McCabe podcast I was listening to, and Eric Cressy gave a good point of no matter what, believing that the athletes under your care have a competitive advantage working with you over somebody else. Right. So I feel like in that space, if you have the same program, like for me, I don't mind sharing programs. Sure wants to learn what I do. Great. It's more of the athletes that I work with that I have that I'm touching on have a competitive advantage in their sport because they're working with me, not somebody else. And that's a big part for going to different spaces like college recruiting and making sure that smart as a sports performance coach or strength and conditioning coach is understanding and truly believing that you are doing things in a way that's making athletes better and you're doing it better than somebody else could do it. And not in a weird, cocky, egotistical way. It's more of a like, I know that I do things in the way that I am very good at, and I can help you get better. And I think that they are doing things with me better than they could do with somebody else. Right. Then you kind of have to have that little bit of an edge, I think, to be successful at anything, honestly. Like if you're a salesman, if you're a business, right? Anything like, and if you have anything you're trying to be successful at, even you PT, you want clients to come to you versus another practice. You need to be like, okay, well, I can help you get better than if you went over here. I don't, they're good, but this is why you want to train with me. This is my track record. It's kind of like a salesy thing, I guess. It's kind of weird, but think about it that way. Um, that's a big part of, as you develop as a coach of understanding and having that confidence. And I feel like this is a completely different topic now. Relationships with athletes. But
No, and it's incredibly deep. And I realize, we can talk about this all day long and still just scratch the surface that way. And I think the more that you think about this as a coach, the more you talk about it with other coaches, and the more you even get feedback from your athletes. That's one of my favorite things to do is ask them, like, hey, look, how are we doing? Like, what could we do better?
yeah,
And literally being so confident that you can take constructive criticism, factor that in, and adjust what needs to be adjusted accordingly. I think if you can do those things, again, it sets you up on this path for success. But this is a very deep area that we can literally talk about and have hundreds of conversations with athletes and still not cover all of it that way. And
yeah.
obviously, I think you're a phenomenal resource for people listening who want to talk more about this with someone and learn more about it that way. Where can they reach out to you at, Jordan?
Yeah, email jtb52@duke.edu. If you like, you can email me. Instagram. I don't even remember my Instagram handle. JTB_411. I think it is. Reach out. Yeah, easy ways to do it. Obviously, probably look me up on the Duke Strength and Conditioning website. Either way, however you want to look it up. But yeah, always down to talk. Network is always fun. Building relationships is one of the best things you can do these days in the world of digital everything.
And
Yeah.
as you have gone out and succeeded as a sport performance coach, made relations with hundreds of high level athletes, and continue to provide that level of impact to this day, how are you yourself able to kind of flip around and personally be a husband, be a father to your kids that way? Because this comes up a lot when I'm talking with strength coaches. They feel like, I can't provide, I can't be there with my family, or, I'm on the road all the time and I just don't know how to balance it. And you seem to do an incredible job of that. So how are you able to do that? And what advice do you have for coaches that are like, man, I don't know how this guy makes it happen?
I'll say one again, going back to my unique experiences, like I'm going to give 99.9 of all of that shout out to my wife, who's been supportive of this when I wasn't making any money, right? You're an intern. Actually, I was a unpaid worker in the sports performance field for 2 years, right? Not even just like 1 year. It was 2 years of working for free, and doing personal training on the side at a different location, at somewhere else at a five facility. Making, I think that first year, I think in those 2 years combined, I think I made 25K, right? So she has been the massive support through all this, and her position at where she works has given me the ability to do this. And I try to be the most, honestly, it's the other way around. Like I try to be the most supportive, best husband I can be, and try to adjust things in my schedule to fit hers. She's a very successful cult businesswoman in the financial sector. Um, she works for the largest charitable organization in the world, Fidelity Charitable, and um, yeah, she's amazing. She's the best mom. I mean, just kind of goes back to all the love. I love my kids. I love my boys, Britton and Wells. They are the best. And just trying to be around them as much as I can, and realizing, and having them grow up in this atmosphere is amazing. Being able to bring my son to this, if I don't have the schedule works out or it doesn't work out, I bring him in here when I need to, um, or when I can. Just he gets to be around the athletes and he loves it. He'll just start picking stuff up and throwing it around, like the light barbells. He'll start throwing up and do Olympic movements he's trying to copy, and I've taught him none of that. He just likes to do it. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's huge part is just over communicating. Love your family. Big part of me is my faith, right? And just making it all work the best you can. Obviously, some adjustments might have to be made and compensations here and there, but we've been able to make it work, fortunately for us, thank God. And that's just how it is. It's finding that grounding in your family for me and my faith that's just helped me be able to do this.
I'm right there with you. I couldn't agree more. And I think if you are someone who's faith centric that way, that I come back to this acronym a lot, but having this emphasis on putting Jesus first, putting others before yourself, if you have that alignment, then
Yeah,
again, I've shared so many different things where I'm like, oh, this is the thing, this is the thing. Like that's the most
yeah,
important thing, in my
yeah.
opinion.
I mean, again, it goes back to me and my philosophy with the athletes I work with, love people, right? And when you actually love people, then you're caring about them, and then it goes back and caring about asking questions, caring about the answers, and caring about their performance, and caring about their well-being is what's going to drive you to be the best coach.
Absolutely. Jordan, I know we could talk about this
Yeah,
all day. Is there anything
absolutely.
else we didn't get to cover that you wanted to?
And I don't think so. I'm sure we could hook up another video if we needed to, but and I feel like we covered a lot, touched on a few different, three different things, but it was good.
Absolutely. Jordan, I really appreciate your time and all the insights that you shared with people listening today. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Of course. Thank you. Appreciate it, Dan.